A baby is born in a hospital in Houston, Texas. At the same exact moment, another baby is born in a hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. For over 150 years, the story of these two children would have been identical. They are American citizens. You can find it in the first sentence of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The order tries to deny citizenship to children born in the U.S. if their mother is here unlawfully or on a temporary visa, and their father isn't a citizen or legal permanent resident. In a 6-3 decision, the court didn't rule on whether the executive order itself is constitutional. Instead, it took away the main tool the lower courts were using to block it. We're now facing a patchwork system of citizenship. The hospital, trying to follow federal rules, may be forced to refuse to issue a birth certificate that confirms U.S. citizenship. That child is now, in the eyes of the federal government, not an American. They could be rendered stateless with no country to call their own. They lose out on a social security number, public benefits, and the basic security of living in the country they were born in without fear. Their argument is that the children of undocumented immigrants or even temporary visitors aren't really subject to the jurisdiction of the United States because their parents owe allegiance to another country. It's the exact same argument that the government medanned the Supreme Court rejected in the Wong Kim Ark case more than 100 years ago. The Supreme Court's ruling is a huge win for the Trump administration and a devastating blow to the principle of birthright citizenship. Even though the court didn't say the executive order was constitutional, let it take effect in large parts of the country, kicking off legal chaos and terrifying families. The fight is far from over. The cases are now back in the lower courts, and immigrant rights advocates are scrambling to get new, broader protections in place with class action lawsuits. The court back then made it clear that subject to the jurisdiction simply means you are subject to the laws of the United States. And guess what? Everyone physically in the country is, with those tiny exceptions for diplomats and enemy soldiers. If you get a speeding ticket, you go to court. If you commit a crime, you go to jail. You're subject to the jurisdiction. To argue otherwise is to ignore 125 years of settled law and the clear history of an amendment that was written to be broad, clear, and inclusive, specifically to prevent this exact kind of politically motivated exclusion. Even many conservative legal scholars have historically agreed that the 14th Amendment guarantees birthright citizenship. Therefore, they claim these kids aren't entitled to citizenship. This interpretation has been pushed for years, but it gets both the history and the law completely wrong. But through a procedural ruling that has weakened the court's power to check the executive branch, the most important thing you can do right now is stay informed and understand what's really at stake. Support the legal organizations on the front lines of this fight, like the ACLU and CASA, who are suing to protect these families. And most importantly, recognize that the very definition of what it means to be an American citizen is on the line. The outcome of these court battles and future elections will decide if the United States stays a nation where being born here makes you a citizen, or if we become something else entirely. This creates a permanent, multi-generational underclass of people born and raised here, but shut out from the fundamental rights that come with citizenship. A child's right to be an American could now depend entirely on which state they happen to be born in. To get a birth certificate for their baby, parents might now have to prove their own legal status, throwing up a new, ugly hurdle for everyone. The whole point of birthright citizenship was that it was a great equalizer. It made sure that everyone born here started on the same legal footing as a citizen, no matter their family's story. It was a core part of the American dream that who you are is undefined by who your parents were. This decision unravels that very idea, creating a caste system based on who your parents are and where you were born. Immigrant rights groups like the ACLU and CASA immediately filed new class action lawsuits to try and build that nationwide shield again. But that takes time, and the legal fight is just getting started. In the meantime, thousands of families have been thrown into chaos and terrifying uncertainty. In states like Maryland and Washington, where lawsuits filed by those states created injunctions that might still apply, children born to non-citizen parents are likely still safe. But in states like Texas and Florida, which didn't challenge the order, children born after late July 2025 to parents targeted by the executive order could be denied U.S. citizenship at birth. Are we a nation united by a single set of laws and values, or just a messy collection of states where your basic rights can change the second you cross a state line? The economic and social fallout could be enormous. A generation of U.S.-born non-citizens would be forced to live in the shadows, unable to fully participate in the economy, unable to vote, and left vulnerable to exploitation. This isn't just an immigration issue. This is an issue that strikes at the very heart of our democracy and our constitutional order. The Supreme Court severely limited the power of a single federal judge to issue one of these nationwide injunctions. Writing for the majority justice, Amy Coney Barrett argued that federal courts do and have the authority to act like a general oversight of the executive branch, and that blocking a policy for everyone goes beyond the power Congress gave them. Now, let us be clear. Every court that has actually looked at the substance of this order has called it what it is: patently unconstitutional. Lower courts immediately stopped it from taking effect using a tool called a nationwide injunction. An injunction is basically a court order that tells the government to hit the brakes while the courts sort out if a policy is legal. A nationwide injunction applies to everyone, everywhere, not just the specific people who filed the lawsuit. This is the Citizenship Clause. It was ratified way back in 1868, right after the Civil War, for a very clear reason: to slam the door on one of the most shameful Supreme Court decisions in history, Dred Scott v. Sandford. The immediate result is that the nationwide injunctions that were shielding the country from the birthright citizenship order have been lifted. After a 30-day period for government agencies to figure out the details, the executive order can now be enforced in states that weren't part of the original lawsuits. The court didn't approve the executive order, but it absolutely dismantled the legal shield that was protecting the entire country from it. That ruling said that black people, whether they were enslaved or free, could never be American citizens. The 14th Amendment was written to rip that racist poison out of our legal system and set a clear, objective standard for who is a citizen. It completely flipped the script, making it so your citizenship wasn't decided by who your parents were, your race, or what politicians felt like that day, but by the simple fact of where you were born. But because of a Supreme Court decision that just dropped, one of those children might now be a citizen, and the other could be left stateless. This isn't some far-off legal what-if anymore. A recent ruling has effectively given a green light to an executive order that tries to redefine what it means to be an American. The constitutional right that has been the bedrock of American society for more than a century has been cracked. Not by a constitutional amendment, but by a procedural ruling with devastating real-world consequences. The era of guaranteed birthright citizenship for everyone born on U.S. soil is facing its biggest threat yet, and the fallout is happening right now. For 156 years, the rule has been simple and powerful. This principle, known as jus soli, or right of the soil, was tested and cemented by the Supreme Court 30 years later, in 1898. The case was United States v. Wong Kim Ark. Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco to Chinese parents who, because of the racist Chinese Exclusion Act, were legally blocked from ever becoming U.S. citizens themselves. When he came back to the U.S. after a trip to China, the government told him he couldn't enter, arguing he wasn't a citizen. But the Supreme Court said not so fast. In a landmark 6-2 decision, the court confirmed that the 14th Amendment means exactly what it says. Since Wong Kim Ark was born in the U.S., he was a citizen from birth. The only exceptions were incredibly narrow-think children of foreign diplomats or invading armies because their allegiance is to another government. So they aren't truly subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. for over 125 years. Wong Kim Ark has been the law of the land, confirming that birthright citizenship is a core constitutional guarantee for everyone, whether their parents are citizens or not. So, what just changed? On his first day back in office, President Trump signed an executive order taking direct aim at this foundation. This is where the new Supreme Court ruling comes in. In short, the court said judges can only protect the specific people in a lawsuit, unless it's a class action. The real-world fallout from this procedural decision is immediate and catastrophic. Just think about what this means for a family. Mother gives birth in El Paso, Texas. Advocates are already sounding the alarm that this will create a bureaucratic nightmare for all new parents in those states. This ruling does more than just hurt individual families. It fundamentally tears at the fabric of American society. Country where your citizenship is a geographic lottery is a country divided against itself. Forces us to ask some really tough questions about who we are. Now, people who support the executive order will latch on to 5 words in the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. This isn't some brilliant new legal theory. So, where does that leave us? But we're in a really precarious moment. A fundamental pillar of American identity is under attack, not through an open constitutional debate,